The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. I'm Kim Mack Rosenberg. I'm the General Counsel of Children's Health Defense, and we have a great show for you today. We have with me this morning Ray Flores and Sasha Latipova to discuss Children's Health Defense's petition to the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, to revoke the COVID vaccine licensure. And afterwards, Mary Holland is interviewing Ray McGinnis on the aftermath of Canada's trucker convoy. Ray has written a wonderful book on that subject. Before we get to Ray and Sasha, I wanted to go over some top news items with you that are all relevant here this morning. First, Aaron Siri delivered a scathing rebuke on the childhood vaccine schedule to the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. While he gave an excellent presentation, both Paul Offit and Peter Hotez declined the invitation to appear before that committee. The committee is finally comprised of specialists who are willing to take a good hard look at that vaccine schedule. Additionally, on Monday, the U.S. Supreme Court vacated a decision by the Second Circuit, which includes New York, in a case involving New York State, delivered a huge win with respect to religious exemptions. It vacated an opinion in a case called Miller against McDonald. McDonald is the commissioner of the New York State Department of Health, sending that case back to the Second Circuit to determine whether or not religious exemptions are appropriate in light of a Supreme Court decision from this summer called Mahmoud v. Taylor, which was focused specifically on parental rights and religious freedoms. And finally, in a show of support for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., President Trump ordered a comprehensive evaluation of the childhood vaccine schedule. This is a schedule that has never been fully tested, neither the individual vaccines or the schedule as a whole. This has been a long time coming, so we're very excited to see movement on that front as well. And what we're here to talk about today, and as reported in the Defender, Children's Health Defense has asked the FDA to revoke COVID vaccine licenses, and we're calling on the public to submit hundreds of thousands of comments on this. We will be providing in the show notes a link where you can go to review the documents and make comments. But first, I'd like to bring on Ray Flores, who is our senior outside counsel at Children's Health Defense, and Sasha Latipova, who is a highly credentialed researcher and writer with significant experience in the pharmaceutical and medical industries. Thank you both for being here this morning.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So let's jump right in. Ray, can you tell us, some people may not be familiar with what a citizen petition is and what that vehicle allows people to do.
Yes, thank you very much. It is a formal petition to the FDA, and it's different than a grassroots petition or a petition to put something on the ballot that you just sign. You are able to express comments in detail and attach up to 200 megabytes of studies and supporting information from your position that, as long as it's in 10 megabyte chunks, that the FDA has to consider. So it's kind of like a Substack on steroids. You can just voice your support as well if you want to. The whole idea is that the FDA must respond in 180 days. So it's like a court case in a way, except the beauty is that the people get to chime in as well.
Thank you for that. And can you, both of you, I'd like you both to comment on what this particular citizens petition is and why it's important?
Sasha?
Well, yes. So this petition is important because it's the first one that I'm aware of, where it's very comprehensively reviewing the biologics licensing application standard and showing that none of it was met by these mRNA shots by Pfizer and Moderna. And we're also uncovered the we're calling them mislabeled and misbranded, and we would like FDA to come to the same conclusion because these products were never previously approved on the market for anything, and they went on the market under non-investigational pathway EUA. And then in 2021, Peter Marks, then head of CBER at FDA, simply mislabeled them. He called them BLA when these products have never met BLA standards, not even a single BLA standard. And this petition outlines why. And also our focus, unlike other arguments that have been submitted over the years, we're not arguing anything about science or safety or efficacy. We're simply pointing at the standards and the boxes that need to be checked by the manufacturer to achieve the BLA compliance. And our petition states that these standards have not been met at all, not even minimally.
So I think that there are a lot of individuals out there who don't understand the difference between EUA and licensure by the FDA. Ray, can you comment on what those differences are and why it's critically important to understand the differences?
Well, the PrEP Act authorizes emergency use authorization products to be rushed into the marketplace during a quote unquote emergency or a pandemic. And they skip all the safety standards that are required for a labeling of a licensed item. So what's dangerous is when you take all the factors that make something an EUA product, which is basically almost no standards, and then slap a label on it that says it's licensed.
So people think that they're getting, and I think thought they were getting during the pandemic, a licensed product, and they're not. And what's now been licensed really hasn't gone through all the processes that it should go through or a product typically goes through. Is that correct?
Yes, and they even say, what was Pfizer BioNTech is now marketed as Comirnaty, or, Moderna is now marketed as Spikevax. Well, you can't just market something and slap on a label, as Sasha points out, and her research and her findings were incorporated heavily into this petition. It shows step by step what they should have done and what they didn't do.
Mm-hmm. Sasha, can you talk a little bit about the history of the PrEP Act? Because so much of this, the EUA, hinges on what the PrEP Act is, what it allows the government to do. And it's been around for 20 years, and most people don't know about it.
Yes, correct. And I didn't know about it until I started looking into these COVID shots, how they went on the market, why are they not complying with even the basic consumer safety laws, and how the manufacturers are able to get away with it. And that's eventually led me to discovering for myself that all of this is under PrEP Act. And the history of PrEP Act, it was passed in 2005 on Christmas, on the weekend, in the middle of the night, and it was stuck into defense appropriation bill for Katrina relief funding. So of course nobody could vote no. At that time, it was pushed through by the by the Republicans in Congress, and the Democrats were opposing this bill, including senators at the time, Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, speaking against PrEP Act passage and actually saying very correct things, in my opinion, and calling it unconstitutional, because it is unconstitutional. It violates several important provisions in our rights, especially to sue for injury and liability, and it completely turns off any litigation or any consumer safety safeguards for these products. At that time, it was justified by what if U.S. gets attacked by chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear weapons, and in that very dire scenario, we need some urgent ability to distribute products, medical products, to the population, and not hold anyone liable for how they're being used for what and what happens afterwards. And that was how this bill was justified. Now, as I said, this is and it explicitly makes this new pathway that is just distribution. So the government says, this has nothing to do with medicine. It's not a clinical trial. It's not an experiment. We just distribute these products for largely off-label uses. And we can't have people suing for liability because this is during a very dire emergency. Well, today, our assertion is that this federal law is being abused and misused because the PrEP Act declaration for COVID is still extended by the previous administration to last until the end of 2029. And there are 8 other PrEP Act declarations for emergencies that don't exist in the United States. For example, for smallpox, it's supposed to last from 2008 to 2032, while smallpox has been announced fully eradicated in 1979. So these declarations are used to buy products typically into national stockpile, and they're not supposed to be used very broadly in civilian population when there is no actual emergency. But today we have these vaccines, and as we are describing in our petition, they were simply relabeled from EUA, this mass distribution for seaborne weapons attack purposes, a huge disaster scenario. But now they're in billions of doses, new versions being produced, and the product has never met even the basic BLA standard. So in our opinion, it's a glaring violation. It's an abuse of federal law. It's using PrEP Act for what it was not designed to be used, and this needs to be addressed.
Thank you. And Ray, can you talk about legally how people's rights to recover if they're injured are limited by the PrEP Act?
Well, yes, of course. I mean, the PrEP Act is public enemy number one. And this is just one more example, because not only can you not recover, but, they're rushing these substandard products into people's arms. You have to file what they call under the CSIP program, the Countermeasures Injury Compensation Program. And out of about 14,000 applications, only 41 have been accepted and paid, a mean amount of $4,100 per, total per injured party. And so that's part of it. The second part is the willful misconduct avenue, which is really illusory. In my case, Watts versus DOD is the only case ever to have been filed under the PrEP Act in over 20 years. So it's next to impossible to recover, and that's what they love about it. I mean, it's downstream liability to the max, avoidance to the max, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's much more limited recovery even than the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program under the 1986 Act for most vaccines on the childhood schedule.
Yes, it's an administrative process, and you don't get attorney fees, or it's very, very limited. $4,100 is an insult to these people. It is an insult to humanity.
No, yes, and they're what's called a payer of last resort, right? So they're sort of like the Medicaid of injury compensation programs. They only cover what hasn't been covered before, and only pay for what they deem medically necessary, if they pay at all, which may limit people who need to seek treatment that may not be considered mainstream treatment, even for their injuries, because no one really knows how to deal with some of the injuries that we're seeing coming out of these injections. Now, some people may say, okay, COVID is over. Why are we concerned about the licensure or the improper licensure of these injections? Well, Sasha, can you? Oh, go ahead, Ray.
Right. I'd like to, first of all, give a black eye to the former administration for having approved these items without having met the standards, having them jump tracks. And then the second thing, too, is that since the mRNA technology is still out there, and there's new pandemics on the horizon, we can't allow them to just keep doing this without calling them out on it. Sorry about that.
Mm-hmm. Sasha, would you like to comment as well?
Yes, so as I said, COVID is not over. The PrEP Act declaration remains extended until December of 2029. And that declaration removes all liability for injury. So even though the FDA claims today that these are fully licensed BLA products, when somebody is injured by these fully licensed BLA products, they have to go to a countermeasures injury compensation program, which, as Ray described, is just a black hole, administrative, pays nothing, and has severe limitations as to how to even submit this claim. So for purposes of marketing, they're BLA licensed. For purposes when it actually matters to somebody, it turns out they're countermeasures. And countermeasures are the only EUA. There is no other EUA. EUA equals countermeasures. So if somebody says you have to go to a countermeasures injury compensation program, that means that the governing law for these shots, no matter what FDA says about them, is EUA, PrEP Act law. And so they are EUA. And these are EUAs in disguise, which Peter Marks just slapped a label on saying it's BLA, but it has never met a standard. And we're discussing in detail all the evidence of how fraudulently, in fact, for purposes of BLA, this whole package was constructed, although all of this is allowed by EUA law.
Sasha, can you talk about, for example, how Moderna did or did not adequately test their products in preclinical studies?
Yeah, so one of the examples I sent you that those PowerPoint screenshots, which I took out of Moderna's non-clinical data package, which was submitted, and FDA claimed they used it for full BLA licensure. So you can see here, this is what Moderna gave them. First of all, they produced these studies after human clinical trials already began, which is a violation of a BLA standard. The animal studies must be completed before human studies. And here you can see that they are testing wrong test articles. So it's like we're making apple juice, we're going to call it organic apple juice on our label, yet to comply with this label, we're going to test these bananas over here. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're testing bananas, calling them apples. They tested, for example, biodistribution study here I'm showing. It's non-GLP compliant. It's done with a different test article. So mRNA 1647 is not Spikevax. That one is mRNA 1273. So they're testing completely different product and also testing it only in male rats, while the Spikevax is marketed to pregnant women and girls and women in general. So there are 3 violations of BLA standard, or just in that one study alone. And then the rest of the package, I'm also highlighting, it's either non-GLP studies or studies, sometimes GLP, but with incorrect test article. They like switch like that all the time. So they have not met even a single standard in this non-clinical data submission. They also waived preclinical pharmacology studies, saying it's because of the WHO 2005 guidance for vaccines. But even that guidance says that if you have a very novel platform technology, you must do pharmacology studies. And so that wasn't done. And it's like this throughout. We have a dozen items we're outlining, both in the animal studies and the human studies, and other violations of BLA standards, that even a single one or maybe a couple of those issues would have normally stopped a BLA program until they're resolved. Yet here, for some reason, they're all allowed.
So, Ray, I think one question people may have if they're not familiar with the citizen petition vehicle is this a lawsuit? Is Children's Health Defense suing the Department of Health and Human Services or the FDA?
Well, we are reserving the right to reassess in 6 months if we want to do it. But at this point, we're giving the FDA a chance to come clean, and we're doing it without a lawsuit and without depending on a courtroom to come to our aid. Uh, and more than that, it's really like, again, like my last citizen action, which resulted in the Childhood Vaccine Safety Task Force being reestablished, is at this time I want to give Mr. Kennedy's detractors irrefutable evidence in step-by-step detail how licensing standards were skipped and why these licensed vaccines are still experimental. And I really think that it's a way for them to self-correct without us really being overly combative at this time.
And what is the petition asking FDA to do?
What we're asking them to do is to revoke the licensure for the Pfizer and Moderna products, and you know, because they're really EUA products in disguise. And then our last ask is for them to be properly relabeled or recategorized as EUA emergency use authorization products.
And why did you decide to proceed with a citizen petition rather than, for example, a lawsuit?
Well, what happened is I was reading one of Sasha's many wonderful Substacks, and I looked at it and I said to myself, this is the perfect opportunity for a lawsuit because, you know, they're not following their laws, their own laws. And you can get a court under the Administrative Procedure Act to get them to abide by the law. But then when I mentioned it to Mary, she goes, "Do you mean a citizen petition?" And at first I said, "I don't know. I don't think so." And then I thought about it. I go, "This is the perfect way for everybody to save face, to blame the prior administration, which are really the ones to blame, and to have them no longer be able to say that these are safe and effective. EUA vaccines can only be categorized as maybe effective. And then two, if it's EUA rather than licensed, it draws a clear line in the sand. So hopefully they won't be mandated next time."
And I think, you know, Ray, you just said next time. The fact that, you know, we have mRNA technology out there and there's a lot of talk about using this platform for many different uses, but simply, even if, and we know that it's technically not over, even if the COVID emergency was over, if something happens again and there's another pandemic or another emergency, the PrEP Act and everything that goes along with it can apply in that situation as well. And Sasha, can you comment on how the PrEP Act is still being used, not only for EUA products, but treatment if you've been injured, and even for flu shots now?
Yes, exactly. So it's very important to actually, for people to read the extensions that were signed for COVID emergency. So outgoing administration, Javier Becerra, previous HHS secretary, extended the current COVID declaration. There was the 12th extension. That's what to last until 29. And if you read that document, they also broadened, it tremendously broadened the scope of this declaration, including the flu shots, by the way, most people don't know, and including any treatment of the injury from the first countermeasure injury. And countermeasure injury is not just by the vaccines, but anything that was used to treat COVID, including marketed products, previously approved products, you know, opioids, narcotics, whatever they were using, antibiotics. So all of that is included. And now it includes, if you have side effects from the treatment of the original injury, they're also covered by the PrEP Act. And also the covered persons, so those people who are enjoying full liability shield, include everyone. It's not just the doctor, it's the nurses, the pharmacists, the pharmacy assistants, the physician assistants, unlicensed students, also covered persons. So this scope right now has expanded so much. It covers a substantial part of American healthcare, where people think that they're getting properly licensed and regulated products and have some sort of a recourse if things go wrong. And guess what? They don't. And so that's why this is extremely important to pay attention to.
And Ray, can you talk for a minute? We're talking about, the limitations on liability and how difficult it is to recover. Can you give us a very quick update on the Watts case, which is a case that you are litigating with respect to COVID-19 injection injury?
Sure. Since my case is the first one ever filed directly with DC federal court to, to allege willful misconduct, they were caught off guard because their local rules didn't provide for a three-judge panel to be assigned from the outset. And so the court followed, its regular procedure, dismissed the case with a single judge rather than a three-judge panel. Then once he vacated the dismissal and reopened the case, then he asked the circuit judge to assign a three-judge panel, which I'm also challenging because I wanted to start over again fresh to where the three-judge panel is wholly within the district court, and it is does not include a circuit judge on the three-judge panel, which is the normal way things are done. But unfortunately, the PrEP Act, there's nothing normal about it.
That is an understatement for sure. So this is a citizen petition. It's been filed by citizens, but we're also asking citizens out there to participate. Can you talk about what we're asking people to do, what they can do, and how they can do it?
Well, sure. We have a link here and also in the article where it says express your support. And what that basically means is that you hit the comment button. You can either be anonymous or name, give your name. You can attach, again, up to 200 megabytes of information to its studies. And you can talk about how, what your experience is with injuries, mandates, family members' problems, fear of unknown ingredients, the PrEP Act, unknown long-term effects, and you can even go all the way out there into, if you feel that, this is some kind of genocidal plan, you can write about that as well. So, it's open to anything as long as you can support it with some kind of logical scientific evidence.
So this is a real opportunity for everyday citizens to be heard by our government, because FDA is obliged to read everything that's submitted to them. Is that correct, Sasha?
Yes, correct. I just published an article about this also this morning to my subscribers on Substack, and I urge everyone to do what Ray described. Go to the comment page, submit a comment. There are instructions there how to submit a good comment. You can just say, I support this petition, or you can be much more extensive and submit your story, or maybe your scientific research or your data research. This is the opportunity for everyone to participate. We have many citizen researchers like myself who were energized by what was happening to us, by the injustice that has been transpiring, and we want to make this right, and we want to urge the FDA to correct this.
Thank you both for being here this morning. We're out of time. I think this was a great discussion, and I encourage everyone who's watching this to go to that petition, submit a comment, share it with your friends and family so that other people can learn about it and submit comments. I think this is an important opportunity for everyone out there to have a voice about this technology and to learn and understand more about why what FDA did was improper. So thank you both. And now we're going to be joined by Mary Holland interviewing Ray McGinnis on the Canadian trucker convoy aftermath. Thank you both.
Children's Health Defense, wherever you are. I am delighted to be here today and to bring on my guest, Ray McGinnis, to talk about his recently published book, Unjustified, the Freedom Convoy, the Emergencies Act, and the Inquiry That Got It Wrong. Ray, welcome.
Thank you, Mary. Great to be with you.
So we in the United States watched with horror, as I'm sure you did in Canada, with what happened in Ottawa in February of 2022. It seemed like it was really, well, it was both wonderful to see this spirit of freedom and people resisting vaccine mandates, but at the same time, we did, at least some of us, see the brutality of the pushback and the takedown of those demonstrations. So tell us, why were people protesting, and then what happened to Canada?
People were protesting. People went to Ottawa for 2 years, ever since 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Increasingly, people initially were, okay, we'll just follow government directives and so on. Then it became drip. There's some problems with the story we're being told. We have some questions, and people would find that when they were being asked, when they were trying to ask questions of their member of parliament, their city councillors, provincial health officers, that they were being stonewalled and just being told to go away. I have a story of one of the people I mentioned in my book, Mary Holland, was a 34-year reporter with the CBC in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and she became aware of a protest of over 2,000 people who were vaccinated and unvaccinated, and they were getting together in late August of 2021, and the unvaccinated were joining with the unvaccinated. The vaccinated people in that group were cutting up their vaccine passports, and she was aware of the story, and she always got, whenever she pitched the story, she got it right away. She was not allowed to report on that protest. The protest never made air. Instead, she was reassigned to report on a cricket infestation. So this is kind of an example of what was happening. Right. If there were protests, they would get ignored. Or in Vancouver, there was a protest days later in September of 2021, and the protesters were described as nutcases, fringe minority, a bunch of jerks, people endangering healthcare workers, and endangering the unvaccinated who were there because of COVID. But what we learned from the Lancet in April of 2023 was that in my province of British Columbia, anyone who was vaccinated, who ended up in hospital in the first 3 weeks, ended up being counted as unvaccinated. So there was a lot of.
But Ray, I think we wanted to focus on this major protest, right? That happened, I guess, January 2022, February 2022. Tell us a little bit about who were the people, what were they protesting?
So there were truck drivers who had just been told that they couldn't cross the border unless they got vaccinated. They were also healthcare workers and physicians and scientists, and many people in the general public, people who'd been told that they couldn't work anymore, as well as many vaccinated people who didn't agree with the government's hard, heavy-handed approach. And so when they arrived in late January, the government and the media were already depicting them as they wanted to have a conversation about why are these mandates in place? Why are you saying that the vaccine is mandatory? Why are you saying that people have to lock down schools and so on? And the government, instead of having somebody, didn't have to be the prime minister, but having somebody to go and talk to the protesters, as has happened throughout most of Canadian history, the government maintained that people were a fringe minority. That they were trying to create a January 6th North, that they were racist, misogynist, homophobic, unscientific, and so on. And so the government just doubled down throughout the whole 3 weeks, and the protesters who expected, like when the protesters arrived, they would have police officers tell them to, park your truck here. Okay, we're all going in the places where the protest, all the trucks you're seeing were there by instruction. Police officers say, park here, park there. However, it was portrayed as an insurrection in the media, and so that was what was going on. The huge disconnect between the local, what was happening on the ground, and what was happening in the media.
Right. Lou was just showing us footage. So it looks like it was tremendously peaceful. It looks like it was a very diverse group of people. It doesn't look like it was, skinheads and neo-Nazis from the footage that Lou's showing us. It looks like it was bitter cold in Ottawa in January and early February. But the media, it sounds like, had a totally different narrative, that this was an insurrection, which of course was a very questionable narrative in the United States as well. And so the government actually didn't really engage in any good faith negotiations with the protesters?
There was there was no federal government interaction at the local municipal level. Seeing the incendiary description of how the protesters were being depicted, a number of protesters took the initiative to negotiate with the City of Ottawa, senior staff, and the mayor, and they arranged by the weekend of the 12th of February that they would remove 75% of all the vehicles from Ottawa and keep the 25% remaining along Parliament Hill to keep the protests going, to just sort of diffuse things. However, the Prime Minister decided to invoke the Emergencies Act on the afternoon of the day when the government surely knew that just over 100 vehicles, by the City of Ottawa staff, had left the city. So they knew, they estimated that they would have the 75% of the vehicles gone by the end of the 16th of February. So instead, the government decided to invoke the Emergencies Act to show how unruly the mob was and that the government was about to fall.
And isn't it the case, Ray, that this is the first time in Canadian history that the Emergencies Act had ever been invoked?
It's true. The Emergencies Act was the successor to the War Measures Act, and that was invoked in World War I and World War II, and during a crisis in Quebec in the FLQ crisis in 1970. But the Emergencies Act replaced the War Measures Act in order to protect Canadian citizens' charter rights and freedoms. But ironically, here the government went ahead and invoked the Emergencies Act, froze people's bank accounts for the first time ever. So all kinds of things that were going on that had never happened before.
And what was the alleged justification for invoking the Emergencies Act by the Prime Minister?
They were saying things like, well, they were going to have the Emergencies Act invoked because if we don't do this now, it's going to get worse. There was people on the stand of the Public Order Emergency Commission saying that there's, it's like whack-a-mole. If we don't do this now, we'll have to do it sooner or later. So this was the kind of justification. They were also saying that we're getting, heat from the Biden administration, that this is affecting the trade relationship. And they kept pointing to many different things, that there are people, they're Nazis. They just kept making lots of accusations, but by the time all the dust settled, accusations like there were bomb threats against a children's hospital turned out not to be a thing at all. So there was a lot of accusation, and there's not much justification at all, any at all in my view.
Right.
After all,
but the government was justifying the Emergencies Act by alleged violence, which in fact wasn't occurring. Is that right?
That's correct. There was not a single person arrested, not a protester arrested for physically assaulting anyone, although one protester who was a truck driver from Windsor, Zaba is his last name, he had 5 police officers on top of him, kneeing him in the back and in the stomach, and yet he was, I think, arrested for resisting police. So things were quite upside down in terms of what was happening, and then what would a trumped up charge like that. But there was nobody who was ever charged with assault. Nobody ever charged with breaking a window. And actually, Patrick Morris, who was the chief provincial police intelligence officer, reported on in testimony later that he was, quote, shocked by the lack of criminality, and that the reporting in the news and the statements being made by senior government officials that he was providing them, which were showing that there's no reason to be worried, we can really calm down. The RCMP described on the morning of the day of the invocation that the event was a peaceful, family-friendly event, not a threat to a passerby. And then the government ministers and the prime minister would go to the press and describe it 180 degrees in the opposite direction.
So am I right that part of this law that created the Emergencies Act also created the requirement that there be a public order emergencies inquiry after that, and that you attended that took place in 2023? Is that right?
It took place in the fall of 2022, and I was able to attend 1 week of the inquiry in Ottawa, which I flew to from Vancouver, and to watch all 6 weeks of it online. And yes, so it was. Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, you go through metal detectors for all the upset that's going on. It was very surprising to be in the gallery and be maybe one of only 6 to a dozen people that were actually sitting there listening to the hearing in person. Wow. And I would be listening to people who were some of the key people who recommended to the Prime Minister that he invoke the Emergencies Act. One of these was Janice Charette, who was the clerk of the Privy Council. And she was putting together this incident response group of all the key players in government and policing, and trying to get a 360-degree view of what was going on. She said that she never went into the protest herself, neither did any of the people in her group, but she testified that she got her best information about what was going on in the protest from watching the nightly news. Another person who was recommending to the Prime Minister he invoke the Emergencies Act was Jody Thomas, the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister, and she said that there was 4 triggers for invoking the Emergencies Act. There's a plot to overthrow the government, espionage, sabotage, and serious violence that neither the police or the military can handle. And she said no to those first 3. And then when she was asked about serious violence, she swapped out that word and said, well, there was continual violence. And when she was asked what did she mean by that, she said, well, there were honking of horns. And when I was there at the inquiry, it was already established that there had been a provincial court injunction that the horns must cease on the 7th of February, which they did. Right. I mean, there may have been an occasional person that came in and didn't know about the injunction, but anyway. So this was the kind of advice. I mean, honking horns. Yeah, nobody enjoys hearing horn honking or sirens going on, but that does not constitute a national emergency.
No, absolutely not. So is it right that the inquiry was supposed to establish whether or not the emergency was necessary, and they did find that it was necessary? Is that correct?
That was the conclusion of the commissioner, although going through the testimony of police and intelligence officials, none of the police, municipally, provincially, or the federal, the RCMP, asked for the government to invoke the Emergencies Act. At no point did the police even consider the protest that was going on as constituting a riot, which is a number of pegs down below invoking Emergencies Act. You also have, based on a lot of the testimony by protesters and by police, and even by city officials, and by a couple of the Ottawa area residents who were upset about the protests, and one of the key people who's launching a class action lawsuit separately conceded that the only violence she saw was by other residents throwing eggs at the protesters. So based on reading the whole report, it seemed like a nothing burger. And so when Commissioner Rouleau at the end says he recommends, he finds the government was justified for invoking the Emergencies Act, although he finds the basis for this to be not overwhelming, to be in fact very weak. I mean, that's a very
wishy-washy.
poor,
Yeah.
Yeah, wishy-washy.
Wishy-washy. But I think I was interested, Ray, that before writing this book, Unjustified, you had written a book about the 9/11 Commission in the United States. And many people have concluded that that commission report was in fact a whitewash. It was a cover-up. It was deceptive. Do you see grounds for comparison with this inquiry in Canada about the truckers' convoy?
Yes, there are numbers of them. One would be, it would seem that, well, with the 9/11 Commission, it was clear that there was a draft outline that for the whole report that was released in 2004, that the government had a story about what they would find before they began the investigation, and with the inquiry into whether the government in Canada was justified or not, they had a very tight timeline, as did the 9/11 Commission. I'd say that the 9/11 Commission had, the commissioners had 5 minutes to ask each witness. Now there were some short timelines for each of the people cross-examining the witnesses in the Canadian inquiry, but we had 6 weeks of testimony, and people like me can go and look at the testimony and see it. A lot of the testimony, a lot of the documents, at least, that the 9/11 Commission has, I understand, are still classified.
Right.
And yeah, so there's a bit more transparency to what happened with the inquiry up here. Mm-hmm. Nonetheless, it's clear that since the over the 2,200-page Public Order Emergency Commission report was written and proofread and copy edited and printed in 9 weeks, that much of it was likely written before they even got started doing the investigation.
And I think you mentioned that you have attended also some of the trials of the organizers or people who took leadership roles in the convoy. What happened in those trials?
Well, I was able to be at the trial of Tamara Litch and Chris Barber, who just were sentenced on the 7th of October, and I was able to sit through the verdict on the 3rd of April of this year, and listening to the verdict and to the sentencing as well. I mean, the judge will go back and forth and say, well, there was a mass mischief. I mean, considering that Tamara Litch, for example, didn't even have a truck, never honked a horn. Wow. And the judge acknowledges throughout that there were about 13 different convoys that originated from Quebec, from the Atlantic provinces, from Western Canada. Others came from Western Canada that were not part of the convoy that Tamara Litch was and Chris Barber were part of. Others came from convoys originating in Windsor, Ontario, and so forth. So there were people that didn't know who she was that were protesting there. But nonetheless, the judge says, well, there was a mass mischief. And she also says that the seriousness of the charges against them for mischief are illustrated by the fact that the government invoked the Emergencies Act. However, the judge never points out that in January of 2024, a federal court under Justice Richard Mosley determined that the government acted unconstitutionally and illegally when it invoked the Emergencies Act. So the judge in this case is cherry picking information to cobble together her justification, and so it's very troubling because here we have many cases where people who are murderers, rapists, armed robbery get out on bail the next day, but protesters related to the Freedom Convoy have been given a lot of punitive consequences for from. So there's a real disconnect between the fairness of justice in this country.
Right. Were you surprised by what happened, the government's response to the truckers' convoy? I think, Canada is very highly rated for democracy and it's perceived as a country of tolerance. Were you surprised by the government's reaction in 2022 to the convoy?
I was. The sitting prime minister at the time, Justin Trudeau, had been in the previous year or two in India, where there had been ongoing in New Delhi a strike by farmers for over a year, and he had told the Indian Prime Minister that's the price of democracy. But once we had protests arriving in Ottawa, under testimony, the Prime Minister was asked at the public inquiry when he thought of invoking the Emergencies Act, and he answered from the very beginning. So there's the ability of this sitting government to handle challenges to their public policy is really shocking. The Prime Minister said that, well, people are welcome to come and protest, but if they protest and challenge public policy, he said, quote, that's worrisome. Now, I think that one of the key things that people do in a democracy is go somewhere and protest public policy. And if we're not supposed to be challenging public policy in Canada, then we have something different than what I would call a democracy.
For sure. So what's the takeaway for going forward in Canada now, Ray? Where do things stand now in terms of sort of the public sentiment, the sense of community? Where do things stand?
I just read an Epoch Times poll the other day about between 61 and 74% of those that took part in that poll thought that the government was wrong in its actions looking back, and especially the higher numbers like 71% or more thought that the government, the Crown's ask for 7 and 8 years in jail for Tamara Lich and Chris Barber was outrageous and government overreach. And I think that what we have in the aftermath of the Freedom Convoy is a very divided country. People still are not able to talk about vaccine injuries, still not able to talk about what it was like for them over the past 5 years when the government had their various measures, people being fired from their jobs for not being vaccinated. So we're really, I would say we're almost like a post-conversational society where there's an ever-growing list of things that people at dinners, at parties, know not to talk about. And that's not a healthy thing for democracy or even for maintaining friendships. And, there's still so many family members and friends that won't speak to each other because of what's happened. Yeah.
Ray, what ultimately happened with the mandate for the truckers being required to take a jab to drive into the United States? Did they ultimately win on that issue?
I understand, yes, that eventually was rescinded, as were travel mandates and other things, but it took some time, and I think that Chris Barber, who's one of the people who's just been put under house arrest for a year, he has an exception under his conditions, which is if he has to go for work. So if he goes for assignment as a truck driver, he can drive across interprovincial borders. He can also drive across the United States. So it's one of these ironic outcomes that he's under house arrest for a year, but he can drive his truck anywhere he wants to as long as he's working.
That is ironic. Well, what else would you like to impart to our audience? We're mostly in the United States, but also all around the world.
Well, I think that what I want to say is that what's happening in Canada, we're continuing to be in I would say our democracy is sliding away from us. We have bills in Parliament that are Bill C8, C9, and C2 that have to do with things like whether or not people can have $2,000 cash in their wallet, and if they have more than that, they might be suspected of being involved in criminal activity or illegal activity. People can, if some of these bills go through, a person can be not able. Their connection to the internet and their cell phone or their landline can all disappear. And if they complain about it, they speak to a reporter about it, they could be charged $25,000 for breaking the confidentiality of that punitive measure. So we have a number of things going on, as well as some ominous hate speech laws, which may make Canada look something like what's going on right now in the United Kingdom, where they have over 12,000 people a year being charged and being sent to prison for posts online.
Wow. Is there some continuing health freedom organizing along the lines of the Convoy? Is there the remnants of the Convoy sort of energizing resistance to these measures now?
There certainly are groups. I mean, there's numbers of different small independent podcasters and different groups in across Canada that raise questions. The Democracy Fund, the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, and a couple of others that people rally around. There is a travel mandate civil lawsuit that's going forward on the 4th of November. And so that was Carl Harrison and Sean Rickard. And so if that is able to, it looks like it's going to be able to proceed. And so that may get us some wins in terms of being able to board planes and buses and trains going forward.
Well, we are with you. We're very grateful for this really important contribution, studying what happened at this public order emergency inquiry and what's happened during the convoy and how unjustified the Emergencies Act was. And we wish you well in Canada. And we do have a strong CHD Canada. We've had many people working in a variety of ways, podcasting, coming to the conferences, and really organizing people there. So we're grateful for all the work that you've done.
Well, thank you very much. And I was actually able to be at an event in Niagara Falls, and I had a little book table right beside a couple of your CHD colleagues. So it was really great to speak with them then.
That's great. All right. Well, all best wishes. Thank you so much, Ray.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Okay, we're live. Tell everyone your name.
Michael Belkin.
And tell them what the Refusers is, so some people may not know.
The Refusers is a rock band. We've been around for about 12 years now in Seattle, and started with real simple songs about vaccine injury and my daughter's death from a vaccine. She was 5 weeks old. She got the hepatitis B vaccine, and she died 15 hours later. And that set me on a whole journey. I testified to Congress. I was involved with Barbara Loe Fisher and the NVIC. And I had a background on Wall Street. And I know, as a Wall Street analyst, strategist, I know how to get to the bottom of things by digging, looking at the data, how to analyze something. And I started doing that with vaccines. And long story short, I realized what I was up against, big pharma. So I'm from the business world, and I was a contributor to Vaccine Epidemic book, my chapter was called Vaccine Bubble. And it's a little bit like just fighting something that you're not going to win, because they have all, the vaccine injuries are not, you can't sue the drug company, you can't sue your doctor. My doctor wouldn't even give us our medical records when my daughter died. So I came to the conclusion that the way I could fight it was by influencing public opinion. And the best way I thought to do that was music. So I was a musician before I worked on Wall Street. So I came up with this band, the Refusers. And of course, the definition of informed consent is a patient has the right to refuse a medical procedure. So I said, aha, we'll call ourselves the Refusers. So we've been doing that now for 12 years. We played, we've all played at concerts. We played at Bottle Rock Festival in Napa, opened for the Black Keys, done all kinds of things. We're sort of we're definitely shadow banned. We have a Facebook page with 112,000 people. It's a good community of people that know about vaccines, and it's not just vaccines, it's just big pharma in general, and what the government is doing, and how basically the system is really, really messed up. And so we're big fans of freedom. Our songs are about freedom, medical freedom, political freedom, and so that's what I've been doing.
Now, what about the COVID era? How did you get through that, the refusers?
Well, we managed to not get kicked off Facebook so far, which is a bit of an ordeal for sure. So we wrote a bunch of songs. Actually, we recorded it right at the beginning. So we have songs, Where Did Freedom Go? It's one of our latest videos. And Propaganda is another song that we just did. It's a really rocking, sort of a Jimi Hendrix, Pink Floyd kind of song in 6/8. But I've had to navigate the censorship on Facebook, and they slap the fact checkers and stuff. If you had to deal with this, you wouldn't believe. So many great people have gotten kicked off for speaking the truth. So I have to follow their community standards, quote unquote, right? And I've been banged. I ran a meme one time saying, it was a game show host saying, name a product whose manufacturer isn't liable if you get sick or die from it. And they slapped that with a fact check. They said, this is false. You can't say that. So it's insane. So Facebook has turned over this to this crazy bunch of people that will just arbitrarily, just mark things that you post, that you put up. So I've tried to follow their standards. It's a little bit, it's really a guerrilla war, because I'm not doing it for our benefit. I'm putting information out so people will know. So, because I was an idiot, I went in, my doctor said, bring your child in for her shots. Hep B shot for a baby is just such insanity, because it's it's blood transmitted by blood or sexual action. And why are they giving this to babies? The whole thing is so nuts. But there I was. So anyways, I want people to know that they have a choice, and that they should analyze the risk and reward. What is the risk of getting the vaccine, and what might happen in an adverse reaction, and what is the risk of the disease? It's not like diseases aren't real. Obviously COVID is real. It's a bioweapon. There are people on our Facebook page that say, oh no, COVID is just a made up thing. It doesn't exist. No, it's a bioweapon. RFK's book, Wuhan Cover Up, is just fantastic. I love it. It shows the paper trail, the financial trail between government agencies and this Chinese lab that weaponized this virus. So it's not like it doesn't exist, but we have immune systems, and I'm a big believer in natural immunity. I learned that one the hard way. So, so that's it. We're fighting a guerrilla war with music and trying to raise awareness about what is going on. And I just hope that somehow I might get through. I'm not obviously going to change the course of history with a few songs, but hopefully somebody will hear these songs and say, wait a minute, somebody's going to have a baby, or like our drummer, he just had a baby, and he's learned a whole lot about it, and he's listened, and he's taking action based on what he knows about what happened to me and the songs that we sing.
Nice. So what about people who are not on Facebook? How can they follow you?
Facebook is pretty much it for now. So Reverb Nation is an indie music platform. It's kind of like SoundCloud. It's not quite as big time, but we're actually ranked #1 in Seattle rock on Reverb Nation. So we keep putting out these songs and putting out these videos, and we have a fan base, believe it or not. It's mostly digital. It's mostly social media, but we play, live shows, we play concerts and stuff, so mostly it's Facebook. The Facebook page is where we're really centered on, and you have to read between the lines. Like, people just laugh, because it's basically one hard news story every day, and what I do is I use what they consider authorized sources. So for my real world job, I'm a financial market strategist, and I have to read everything out there. I have to know what's going on. I can't not miss anything. So I'm constantly reading every day. Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, FT, New York Times. And so many of these like the hit rate on most of these publications is so abysmally low. Basically 1 to 3% of New York Times is not worth reading. It's good for the arts, you know, other than that, it's all propaganda. Financial Times, same thing. There's just not anything there worth reading. Wall Street Journal is actually pretty good. Of all the mainstream news publications, it's the best. So basically, I try to run a story, hard news story, one every day, and then a bunch of memes. And the memes are basically cartoons, but they're a way to get around the censorship. And the memes get a lot of social media attention. And they get passed on, and I don't, you know, it doesn't say the refusers on the memes. It's everything is just, you know, it's nameless, and it gets. So one thing, so Facebook, we have 112,000 followers, and you can click on this thing. It says post reach, and generally it's about 1,000, 2,000. So basically, if you're a follower of something, you're supposed to get it in your feed, and it should be like 112,000. You run a story, but it's not. It's like a few thousand. And so in order for something to go viral, it has to really catch fire. And they do everything they can to prevent that, because they're trying to prevent the truth from being told. And it's basically a propaganda organ. The government has leaned on these social media companies, Google and Facebook. And I've been on the receiving end of it, and so far haven't been kicked off. But you know, our music's on there. Our stories on there, our memes are on there. That's the best way to follow us. See our videos, everything's posted on there.
You might want to think about getting off Facebook. I can't get on Facebook. They've kicked me off ages ago. So, I mean, you're going to have to have another outlet. Because pretty much I would think most of our viewers are kicked off Facebook.
Actually, I'm kind of amazed. Every morning I go on, open it up and see if I've been... Are you still there?
How they choose some and don't others. All right, listen, thank you so much. Thank you for everything you do. And we're really sorry about your daughter. How old would she be if she was alive today?
26 almost.
See, that's not okay.
Yeah, I'm still at it. So, you know, I think of her every day, and I just pray and hope that the same thing doesn't happen to you.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
I had a battalion commander come to me, and she said, "Dear God, we're killing our own soldiers."
We gather today to honor the incredible service members.
We owe you our thanks. We owe you our respect, and we owe you our freedom.
Just as we have gathered before to remember those who served, those who fought, and those who gave their last full measure of devotion for our country.
According to the Associated Press, the Pentagon is going to require vaccines for all service members.
I'm asking the Defense Department to look into how and when they will add COVID-19 to the list of vaccinations the armed forces must get.
The military was ordering service members to take a shot that they could not lawfully order them to take.
Are you choosing to be non-compliant? Get on the floor! Get on the floor!
Leaders did everything legal or illegal within their power to coerce and influence their service members to get the shot.
I'll never forget, I received a phone call from a mother whose son was a Marine at 29 Palms, and she told me her son and 9 other Marines were being held in confinement in the brig until they got vaccinated.
If you don't do what they tell you to do, they will ostracize you. They will destroy your life.
Stop resisting or you will get tased!
They threatened me with Leavenworth imprisonment. They banned me from all Army Public Health Center facilities for 413 days.
I counted over 140 days where I was put into isolation.
Once it becomes normalized in the military, it often very quickly finds its way into the civilian population, as we saw with the COVID mandate.
The effects extend well beyond just those in uniform, and the impact is really on the entire nation.
8,000 well-trained men and women were fired.
I lost my income. I lost my ability to feed my family.
I mean, I'm being told you're getting dishonorably discharged.
And if you get dishonorable, you lose everything. You can't get certain jobs as a civilian. It follows you for life.
You cannot mandate an experimental medical product. You cannot mandate that on military members.
In my entire medical career prior to this, I had never seen a young person with a stroke. I had never seen someone have a massive clot without provocation.
We were in great shape. We were doing very well. But then as soon after the vax is when my health went downhill.
When people celebrate all the freedoms that the military gets to grant this country, when the military's freedoms and really the country's freedoms are actually being taken away.
Why was the vaccine mandate unlawful? How come the Secretary of War is telling us that the vaccine mandate was unlawful?
We all know that the previous administration issued unlawful orders on mandatory vaccines on an experimental vaccine, COVID-19. You know it, we know it.
You are taught that you have a duty to disobey unlawful orders.
You know, they postulated that we're going to have back pay for members that were kicked out. They're inviting these warriors back into service.
And that was huge. And I was so happy to hear that. But that does nothing for the institution itself.
What I have understood from people in the military is that it has not been made easy and that it really still needs to be done on an individual basis.
We haven't stopped in 4 years when everybody was ignoring us, and we're not going to stop for another 4, 14, or 40 years.
We are at a critical juncture, and the soul of this nation is at stake.
When we talk about orders that are unlawful, now there is a duty to disobey.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.